Good morning and welcome back to Made to Walk. Today we are going to be talking about trauma communication. So, I've had many different conversations over the last few weeks, both with emergency responder professionals and also with like minded individuals in the nonprofit industry who have been asking me some very intentional conversations about how do you approach when people talk about their trauma, or how do you know how to navigate around someone who is doing what we call either trauma projecting or scripting, where they just kind of are going all over the place with their conversation. You're not really sure how to control it or navigate it. And so there's a lot of different aspects about trauma communication. And it's really important that we first understand just the basic essentials of what types of trauma there are, because sometimes the fact that people don't even really know which layer of communication you should be addressing can be the main point of not really knowing where to go or how to handle a particular conversation. So let's just start with the basics. There are three types of trauma that we really need to learn about. The first is called acute trauma. Imagine that that is someone who has gone through something one time, maybe a critical car accident or one type of dramatic or systematic issue. So, a firefighter who fell off his ladder. That would be an acute trauma situation. The second would be chronic trauma. Chronic trauma means that something has happened more than once. Okay. So you've had a couple of things that have been really crucial in your life that have created some chronic trauma. Complex trauma is someone who has gone through continual trauma. Maybe it has been since they were a child and they are still in abusive relationships and they are continuing to make decisions that only perpetuate new layers of trauma that need to be addressed. And that is because they have not learned how to get out of the system of being in trauma or victimization or other things, because that's all they know. Fight or flight is all they know. Chaos is all they know. And so that is approached very differently than someone who's just been very scared from a one time situation or loss. So, how do we know which to really honestly label it? And the first is that obviously we want to be really great listeners, and we're going to dive into how to get into the engagement part of the aspect. But the first thing that we need to understand is that there's two different kinds of communication. One is which we call sharing, and the other is vulnerability. These two are not the same. So I like to think of sharing as a cop saying, is there anything more you'd like to share with me? Because what we're saying is, are there any names, dates, locations, specific details that you want to share with me? This does not work in group settings. I do not ever recommend people saying, would anybody like to share? Because what you're saying is, can you give me the gruesome details of your situation in front of a group of people? Or you might actually be saying, could you give me some gossip about somebody else that I may or may not know? And so I don't recommend that we use sharing when we're talking about trauma situations, unless you are a court ordered reporter or a cop or someone who is trying to actually get detailed truth of a situation. We use vulnerability in group settings. Vulnerability is different. Vulnerability says, I feel like I'm being taken advantage of at work. And so when we're vulnerable about how we feel, other people can say, oh, I have that same sense or feeling, but maybe mine's different. Maybe I feel like I'm being taken advantage of by my sister or by my, other relative or whatever it may be. So it creates a connection. People can be um, able to be transparent while also connecting with other people in similar vulnerabilities. What you don't get is Tom keeps coming over to my desk and continually taking stuff off of my desk, and it makes me feel like he's violating my space, and Tom and Tom and Tom and Tom. And at the end of the conversation, you feel like you know way too much about Tom. And now we've been spending 20, 30 minutes talking about Tom, and you don't actually know how she feels. You just know a lot about Tom. So in that particular situation, What you want to do is re-navigate people back to vulnerability. Oh man, seems like you are having a difficult time at work. I don't even use the name. I don't even say, wow, it seems like Tom is a very difficult person, because I don't know Tom's situation and I don't know the whole story. I'm not there. I can't see the situation. I have no idea what Tom may or may not be doing or what she feels he's doing. So I just don't even address it. What I go back to is, it sounds like you're having a really difficult situation at work. Tell me more about how that makes you feel, so that we push back to the reflection on themselves. They need to be vulnerable about themselves, not pointing fingers at other people. Well, my marriage is difficult because my husband or my kids or my house environment or whatever. Okay, well, those things are in every marriage. Tell me specifically what makes this husband or children or whatever make you, how do they make you feel? Because it seems like that is really what we need to be discussing. And that vulnerability can bring out in somebody else and go, oh, I feel the same way in my marriage. But it's less about the other person and it's more about what you're taking as an emotion. Once someone has shared something that is vulnerable, what can tend to happen is they fall into one of two categories, and that is either shame or guilt. Shame and guilt are not in the same family. So, shame is essentially saying, I'm a bad person. Okay. I am bad. I have issues. I'm always going to be a problem. I'm always going to be this way, whatever it may be. Guilt says I did something bad. I'm addressing something that I need to confess, that I need to get, that I need to rectify, that I need to have forgiveness from. And so guilt works differently than shame. When we are talking about these two aspects, that will come up the more people are vulnerable, because it's just a natural response. We all have shame associated to our childhood backgrounds or situations that have or haven't happened to us. Maybe they're fears of what might happen to us. We start to process those things in real time, and all of a sudden it's almost like a safety mechanism that turns on, that makes you want to shut down from sharing and shut down from being vulnerable, because it's like, oh, this is too scary. I'm out here in the open and anybody could take a shot at me or judge me, and so I just choose not to be vulnerable. What we have to learn is how to address dealing with the shame. Now, what sometimes people do is they associate the word shame with ashamed. And so they get defensive. Okay. And so we have to be very careful about how we phrase this, especially right after someone has gone through something traumatic. The last thing that you want to do after they share is go, so what is it that you feel ashamed about? That phrase is not in congruence with what we're talking about at all. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about. And most people who are volunteers get that wrong. They say something like, well, what is it that you need forgiveness from? Or what is it that you need to forgive? And they jump all the way past the vulnerability. They kind of denounce the vulnerability. They denounce the personal shame of how they feel. And they jump straight to the end. Like, let's just seal this up and call it a day. And when you do that, what tends to happen is that people feel attacked, they shut down, they become recluse, they no longer share, they're no longer vulnerable, they no longer want to participate in group settings, and they pull away from things like corporate worship or wanting to work alongside you. It can work even in professional situations. A cop may be getting really great rapport with somebody, and all of a sudden they just say the wrong thing, and then it is associated with an assumption, and they've moved too quickly. They thought they were building enough rapport to where they could ask this level of a question or they could make this level of assumption, and they kind of throw it out there to see what happens. And what you see is the person just goes, I'm done. I'm no longer participating. So we don't want to do that. Here are some three key aspects that have been helpful in this tier of um, processing. The first is that we have learned to move away by withdrawing, hiding, silencing ourselves, or keeping secrets. So we need people to understand that when we try to control our elements of the particular trauma, so yes, this happened, but I have it under control because I just don't let anyone around my kids anymore. Or I have learned to control this because I just don't go to public settings anymore. They have taken some formulation of control and have told themselves that they're fine, when really they're processing shame. And so, um, it can be really difficult when they step out for the first time and they're kind of testing the waters with vulnerability, or they're oversharing. Oversharing is like, I'm going to trauma dump on you. I'm going to tell you my horrific situation and see how you respond. And we've talked about this in other trainings, where someone will just kind of give you the gruesome, horrible details to see if you'll squirm or you'll run off, because that's what they're accustomed to. And it's about keeping yourself cool, calm, and collected, keeping that eye engagement, not, looking down at your watch or looking off into the sunset, that you're really still with them and that you respond so cool, calm, and collected that it kind of almost throws them off, because they're like, oh, I just really assumed that you were going to judge me, or that you were going to freak out when I, said this. So when we kind of acknowledge how people are processing it, not judge how they're processing, like, oh, you shouldn't be hiding. You shouldn't be, keeping secrets from people. Like, you shouldn't be holding that all in. It's a judgment. And so we allow people to tell us how they're controlling it, how they're handling it. And then we move on to the next part. And we have, in this part, we have also learned the strategy of moving toward. This can be seen when we attempt to earn connection by appeasing and pleasing. So, in this second formulation of control, we are trying to earn. So now you know what my problem is. Now you know I'm complicated. Now you know, I've been through traumatic things. Now you see me differently, because that's a natural assumption, is that I've shared with you this deep, dark secret that I've had. Now you're going to see me differently, and I need to earn back your respect so you can see me as a person and not something that has happened to me. And when we are not careful, we can almost encourage this. Okay. Oh, yes, you need to go and see our uh, in-house person so that you can get help. Like, we use terms like that. You need to go see a therapist so that you can process this situation. And the things that we emphasize make them feel more like, oh, see, like, now they just totally think that I'm like totally messed up. And the way we formulate that can actually create a dependency where they're like, okay, well, then fix me, or how can I be fixed so you can love me? And what we really want to do is we want to encourage communication, connection, and partnership. So, and I'm going to get into this in the next portion of, what the ultimate mission is when we get into these conversations. But we really want to emphasize that anything that we encourage is to the benefit of the person, not to the benefit of society. Like, well, it'll just be better for your family if you get fixed. Or maybe it'll just be better for your marriage if you take the medication. Like, whenever we utilize, um, you have to do this because it's better for society, you really say, you're not worth getting better for. You're not worth having value. But hey, do this thing that you're struggling with because everybody else around you has value, and you're affecting them and you're hurting them. So we're actually going to push them right back to step one, where they go back to recoiling and not wanting to participate and not wanting to be vulnerable and not wanting to do anything, because now the judgment is that not only do they feel this overwhelming sense of pressure on themselves, but now they feel more shame because they realize that, oh, like, this is bad for everyone and it's affecting everyone, and so now I just feel more shame. So we don't want that. It's really important for us to control our words, to control our framing, and to control our time. And I will get into this here in a minute, but it you cannot begin to address these things and go, ooh, I know we just started this conversation, but I got to be out of here in 15 minutes. That's not going to happen. Like, it's just not going to happen. You really have to be conscientious of understanding that there's a commitment to the process and that the first words that you say are the most important, but anything then thereafter has to be appropriate to the timeline. Okay. So you, like I said before, you don't want to jump to the end. Oh, well, who can we just forgive and move on? Like, that doesn't work. You start with the person, and then you start with the process. So if they're in grief, let them go through grief. If they are in a state of anxiety, let them learn how to manage their anxiety. And then you can look at their environment. What can we change in your environment for you to feel safe? And then once you feel safe, then you can associate and assimilate boundaries that are appropriate for other people, so that you can go to people and you can say, hey, we can have this conversation, but I know where the boundaries are now because now I know who I am. I use this great example as often as I can. You can't hear God speak to you and tell you what to do if you don't know the sound of your own voice first. Because then every thought that pops into your head, you're going to sit there and you're going to go, is that God or is that me? Is that my flesh or is that me? Or is that the spirit? Or is that? And you're going to get so lost in your head. You're going to overthink. You can't make decisions. And again, we're going to go back to square one. We're going to pull back. We're going to be a recluse. We're just going to be like, this is too hard. I can't do this. God doesn't speak to me. I'm never going to be able to heal from this. This doesn't work. And you give up. When we heal and we take the intentionality to go through the process, to give ourselves time, to be patient with people, to get to that space where we know the sound of our own voice, we know the sound of our own thoughts, then when we invite the spirit to come and speak to you, it's clear as day because you know the difference between your thoughts and what the spirit is saying. All that to say, going into the third aspect of this conversation is that we have developed ways to move against. This includes trying to gain power over others and using shame to fight shame and aggression. So this becomes motive driven. And if you've ever taken my ethics class, you understand how important motives are to the process of understanding where you are in your ethical order, because sometimes we can think that we are being very helpful and that we're doing great and we are a healed person and we are like I'm doing so great now, like I'm totally done with my past trauma, that I can walk other people through it, because if they could just do it like how I did it, then they'll be like me, perfect, and so you lead with this overwhelming sense of confidence. And what you actually do is you set this precedent and this standard that's irrational for people to measure up to, because no two trauma are the same. And so when they look at that, it actually it's a deterrent. It's like getting sprayed with insect repellent in your eyes. Like, there's just nothing about that that is encouraging or makes people go, oh, wow, I can't wait to be at your level one day. They kind of almost look at that and they're, because trauma knows trauma, and they're like, I don't think you're as healed as you think that you are. And so because they're utilizing this space of something to prove as control. Again, all these things are about control. I have it under control. I know how I'll control it in the future. I know how I can control people around me to see that I have it under control. I know how to reach for control when I want it, but then make it look like I trust God. And so there can become this almost formulation of manipulation if we're not careful. And it's a way of self preservation when you're experiencing shame. And one of those ways is comparing shame. It's saying, oh, my situation was worse and look where I am, so you'll be fine. It might be that you look at it and you're like, "Ugh, I didn't take as long to heal from my situation. They're taking forever. They're obviously not doing as much work as I have." Um, when we start to set tone like that, even in our head, even if you haven't said these things out loud, and maybe you're like, oh, I would never say that to that person, but in my mind, I'm thinking it. When you do it, your body language actually, and again, I go through this in many of my different trainings, your body language holds that. And I can read it on you immediately. Even if you're like, hi, good morning. But in your mind, you're going, oh God, that's that girl. I can read it on your body language that you have already preset a label of judgment. And so if you have been in this field long enough, hear me out. If you have been in this field long enough, you begin to naturally do that because you can see people so quickly in the process of being able to address their situations. You start to go, oh yeah, I've seen this before. Oh yeah, I've seen this before. Oh yeah, I've seen this before. And so what we have to be careful of is that when we are talking to people, that we do not actually place shame because we've already decided, oh, I already know how this is going to go. We have to be very careful of being able to see it and go, yes, I see it, but I don't know where they are yet. And I'm going to take the time to get to know them and understand which part of the experience they're at. I've met people and I can see it in their eyes because I have seen them in so many different stages of life. And so they are walking into that situation fully aware that I probably have a preconceived notion of who they are and what they're capable of. And so you could see it in their eyes. They're wide eyed and they have a sense of, oh gosh, what does she think about me? When I can disengage from my body completely, and I am just present to listen. And I'm like asking questions. Tell me about that. Tell me about how you got there. How do you feel like you got to this place where you were making these decisions? Tell me what your plan moving forward is. Oh, my goal is this. I'm working towards that. I think that's amazing. What my body doesn't hold is, oh God, girl, like there's no way. Because I don't believe that. I genuinely don't believe that. I believe that people can overcome any level of trauma if they're intentional enough and if they meet enough people with care to believe in them. So when you look at a situation and you've predestined it and you've sat there and you go, yeah, that's not happening for that girl. We'll probably be seeing her for the next 2 years, or that relationship's never going to work out. When you start to say those comments in your mind, then you've already predestined it. We know that that's where it's going to end up because enough people like you will carry that type of shame placement, and then they actually cannot move forward. So I know I've spent a lot on this slide, so I'm going to move forward. In the engagement aspect of how do we approach these conversations to begin with, um, when you feel it coming on and you see it, someone will kind of almost take a pause, a deep breath, and they'll go, um, okay. And like they're like building up the strength and they're building up the stamina to be able to tell you this really difficult thing, because it is a huge weight on them, but it is a heavy lift to get it off your shoulders. Okay. It is like bench pressing, and you see the bar with all that weight and you've never pushed it before. And honestly, you don't know if you can. You don't know if you're going to be able to successfully press it. It's kind of like that. Okay. So the first step is just essentially active listening. We know this is the first step to everything, but if you don't know how to do that, it's essentially being very, very, very present. You are engaged. Sometimes you are repeating back what they say, but you do not fall into comparisons. And you do not say things like, oh, yeah, I went through something similar like that too. Oh, yeah, that was me like a year ago. Oh, yeah, that as soon as you do that, you shut down that person because in that moment, they know you don't care anymore. You do not care. You just want people to know that you have been there, that you have overcome, and it somehow becomes about you. When you really care about trauma engagement conversations, you learn to shut down your own story. You may use phrases like, I've been in places where you have been before, but you don't end there. It always moves back to them. I've been in these places before. God has been victorious with me. I know in this particular stage that you're at, you may feel like there's no end in sight. It feels like it's every day, all day. It's a new mission. You're in fight or flight all the time, but he will be very intentional to be with you, and the Spirit is going to lead you. Not like, oh, let me tell you how I did it. Let me tell you how I did it, because if I tell you how I did it, then you copy me, that it'll work. That's not true for trauma. No two situations are the same. What may have worked for you may be the worst plan for them. And then they'll attempt it and they'll be like, okay, I failed at healing. And so now they're completely discouraged and they, again, go back to step one. So we need to be very conscious in caring about the words that come out of our mouth, that they are about the other person and not about us. We affirm what they say. So even if you're like, that's an emotion and it's lying to you, you may not feel that way tomorrow. In that moment, that's very much how they feel. Affirm it. You're angry. I can see that you're angry. I I'm hearing your anger. I am with you. I feel what you're feeling. Like, there's no way to deny that you are angry. What I don't do then is the judgment. So what people see is they see anger and then they go, well, you really shouldn't be angry. Or, God doesn't want us to be to have anger. And so when we do that, then we just place more shame, so now you're making them feel ashamed for how they feel. No, I'm just going to acknowledge, I see that you're angry. I'm not saying that it's right. I'm not saying that it's wrong. I just see that you're angry. I acknowledge that you're angry. I fully understand that. Some people will go back and forth about whether or not you should label. In my personal experience, it has worked like a dream to label. I think that when you label, it gives people this sense that they're not talking to the wall, they're not talking to the wind, that they're talking to someone who knows what they're talking about. So when someone tells me this really horrific thing happened when I was a child, and I still think about it often, and they don't proceed to tell me that there's any other traumas that are going on in their life, or maybe that there's any other traumas that happen then thereafter, then I know it's an acute trauma, right? And I can say, sounds like you're affected by acute trauma. It does give a sense of relief that they go, oh, you know what that is? Okay. Now I don't label them. It sounds like you're a narcissist. No, we don't label people out loud. But we can label the trauma. It lets them know that we've been listening, that we have been addressing their concerns, that we care enough to label and to give them a process and a goal. And that's the next thing, is that we set goals for them. What's a goal that you have for yourself? I just want to be able to not have nightmares anymore. Awesome. That's what we're going to work towards. I'm not going to tell you whether or not that's where you should start or end. I'm not going to tell you if there's 15 steps between here and there, but I am going to tell you that I see your goal, I accept your goal, and that's what we're going to do. And then they need to verbalize the process, because if people can share with you or even be vulnerable with you, but when it comes to addressing what it is they need to let go, or what it is that they really need to do, if they can't even say that out, like, I'm not ready to do that. Okay. If they're not ready to verbalize it, there is no point of walking them through the 15 steps of forgiveness if they can't even say that person's name. They're not ready to let it go. They're just not there yet. Start with something else. If they can't even say what happened to them, they're not ready to let it go. Start with something else. It may just start with, let's start with fear. We're obviously afraid of talking about it. So let's start with fear. Let's address fear. Let's spend time on fear. Spend weeks on fear. Get past the fear. Get control of fear. Then go back to, okay, do we want to talk about it? You can't force people into a point of surrender if they're not there yet. There's nothing, I promise you, there is nothing that you can say or do to a person if they're not ready. I've had this conversation with people in juvie. I've had conversations with people who, are adults that had very mischievous backgrounds as young children. And I would always ask, like, is there anything that anyone could have said or done for you that would have changed the trajectory of your decision making? And the answer is always. I have yet to have one person say, like, oh, if someone had only done this, um, they'll say no. No, I didn't want to hear it. I I thought I was in control. Sometimes it's just like I just didn't care. I just liked the situation that I was in. I liked being high. I liked whatever. And so when the spirit is ready, when sanctification is ready, if the person perceives themselves as, I believe in God, I can't get control of this right now. That's okay. I believe in the sanctification process, and I believe that when he works on you enough, that you will get to a place where then at that point surrender is easy. But it may take days, it may take weeks, it may take months, it may take years for you to get to that point. I have been with people for 5, 6, 7 years. We have had the same conversations year after year after year. Why do I make these decisions? Why do I self-sabotage? Why do I? And I tell them why. And I tell them all the same things. But it'll take just the perfect day in the perfect situation from the perfect person. And they go, oh, I heard it and I did it and I released it. And it was like nothing new. It was nothing that nobody else wasn't saying. It's just the timing wasn't right. Okay. So they have to be able to verbalize and release it. Then you start to go back to rebuilding. So a lot of people will go, oh my gosh, you surrendered that. That's awesome. Okay. Thanks for playing and bye. And that's not how it works. You have to rebuild habits so that people don't fall back into bondage just because you're out of something, just because you've surrendered something, just because you have um, felt the conviction and you have confessed it with your mouth, just because you have asked the Lord to remove something. It does not necessarily mean that you have control over it. The Holy Spirit will give you the intentionality to keep going forward, but you have to have a pattern to move forward. Okay. You have to have something to replace a bad behavior or to replace a habit or to replace a codependency. Like if you're just leaving bad relationships and you've always been codependent, well, what's going to happen? They're going to find something else to be codependent to. It's like people who have to be at the church 24/7. Why? Because they never dealt with their codependency issues. Okay. And they're like, well, I just one day, all of a sudden, I'm just not a drug addict anymore. Okay. Good for you. I'm glad you're not on drugs. But that doesn't mean that you don't still have codependency issues, because now you've just replaced that need for a hit of endorphins to like going and having conversations with people and making yourself feel good and making yourself laugh and all those things. It's the same endorphin relief as doing drugs or alcohol. So it's a healthier habit for sure. Like I 100% am so glad that you're making healthier decisions, but it doesn't mean that you've dealt with the root of the issue. So you have to be conscientious that just because someone looks like they're doing better or looks like they're healthier or looks like they have it under control does not necessarily mean that they do. They need to rebuild those habits. And then guess what? We repeat the whole process again by dealing with the next layer. If someone has chronic or complex trauma, then dealing with the first set of issues, like maybe you're just starting with, well, when I was a child, my dad left. Okay, let's start there. And that perpetuates onto the next thing. Then I had a lot of abuse. Then I had abandonment issues. Then I had a drug addiction. Then I was homeless. Then I was. It's like you are committing to the same process per level of trauma. Woo, I know you just did the math on that and you were like, that's just so much time. It is so much time. It is so much time. Therapy and counseling is a process. It is not a quick fix. It's not. And so I'm going to get into the mission aspect of that here in just a minute so that you understand that fully. You need to have patience, and then you need to have perspective. This is really vital. So we repeat, we have patience, we have perspective. If you're doing this cycle and you are like, I am doing this cycle, like I did what you said, we've done all the steps. It's, like whatever. Okay, whatever you labeled it as, or whatever tools you gave them to rebuild their habits is not working. You have to have perspective of knowing when to shift. Here's another thing. You have to know when to uh, relinquish your own control of saying like, I can do this. I can fix this person. I can do that. I can fix this person. I've been there. I've totally been there. I've seen it. And I'm like, I have watched this a million times. I can walk them through this. I know that they can get this under control. It didn't work, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because I couldn't relate. I never had drug and alcohol dependency, but I watched my parents do so much of this counseling that I thought that I could handle it. And I really thought I could walk this particular person through it. This was years ago. And I was really beating myself down that I couldn't get them through it. But the truth of the matter is just I was not the right recipe. I was not the right person. I was not the right voice. It was not the right time. It was not like they were not in this stage. When I really truly go back and I look at it, they could verbalize, but they couldn't release. They refused to rebuild positive habits. They refused to do layers of this. They just wanted a one time fix, and they were frustrated that it didn't get fixed. And so they would go right back to the drugs, when, I'm a lost cause. I'm just going to go right back to the drugs. And then you have to start all over again. And so you couldn't even deal with the levels and the layers of the trauma that were going on because there was a lot of different layers because they just were not committed to the process. That's just the honest truth. They wanted a process that looked like other people that they knew. Oh, I'll just do 12 steps because that worked for so and so. Or I'll just go to church on Sundays because that worked for so and so. Or I'll just give up this thing, but not all these other things. And so it doesn't work. If the person is not committed to the process or the process that you've put in place is not the right process for the person, it's okay. All it just means is it's time to refer them. It's time to let go. It's time to understand that God can use other people. They don't have to, he doesn't have to just use us. And so we can relinquish that control. We can hand that over to somebody else to be effective. So what is the main mission? Well, let's talk about this because again, it goes back to our motives. We really have to understand that this is not a feel good ministry. This is not a feel good process. It is not so I can come in and go, oh, I walked one more person through blah, 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 blah. It is a process that if you cannot commit to, if you cannot see through from start to finish, if you cannot truly get to the root of the issues and go layer for layer for layer, don't even start with them. Just refer them. Just refer them to someone who is. And that could be a therapist, that could be a counselor, that could be, a volunteer who absolutely just loves to love on people. If you are not the person that can like keep taking the calls and keep having the coffee meetings and keep whatever and keep walking in them through it in discipleship to process through all the different layers that there are, then don't do it. Okay. Because what they're going to pick up from you is what they've picked up from enough people, which is like, oh, okay, so we're still at this stage. Oh, right. Okay. Well, here's what you have to do next. And you can tell the frustration. You can tell you don't care anymore. You're too built on the endorphin high, which is like, oh, amazing. Like I'm doing good. And then you want another spike. So like usually that comes with like a new person. If I can walk a new person through this and then another person and then another person and then a new situation and you're looking for newness. And what it is it's not committed. It's not a commitment to doing more for more people. It's a commitment to being less for as long as possible. And that really sucks when you think about it. Because the only way to be effective is for it to not be about you and to be as low on the totem pole of things that matter for as long as humanly possible. Does that make sense? So let's talk about these trauma-informed principles. The first being safety. We want to be safety, create physical and emotional safety for those you support. So again, we're not walking into these situations. I've said this in other trainings. We're not walking into these situations to have something to take back to the table and be like, oh, let me tell you about this girl who came to me or this guy came to me and like, oh, I'm such a good person because I went through this situation with them. No, you have to be safety. You have to be confidence. You have to have level 2, trustworthiness, be consistent, transparent, and keep your word. So if you are going to meet with them or if you say, I'm going to be here with you through this whole process, and then about a month into it, you're like, I'm just really tired of this person and I'm done. You need to find a way to pivot in a way that is conducive and with kindness. Okay. So, hey, we've been working together for a month and I can just tell I am not the right person for you in this process. And because I love you and because I care about your situation and because I want you to truly find healing, I want to recommend that you go and you see such and such person, or I have invited someone else to come and sit with us to see if they're a better fit for you. But knowing that you're not giving up on them or quitting, that you are being intentional to communicate and be transparent about every decision that you make in the process. So, the third being choice, give individuals control and options where possible. So, again, you don't get to set the stage for, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's level one. There's no level one, there's no formula, there's no perfect process. If you think that you've built some magical, amazing, perfect process, you're about to be humbled, because the truth of the matter is that that does not work. Every single person is at a different stage. They may have traumas that sound similar. People have gone through similar experiences, but that doesn't mean they're processing it the same way. For two people who have gone through the same trauma, one might be completely shut down and doesn't want to talk and has a lot of fear factors and cannot relinquish a lot of things that are going on. And for the other, they are just trying to move as fast as they can and stay as busy as long as they can and be out there and, trying to make something of worth of their situation so that they don't have to address their problems. If you have a critical situation, a critical trauma, you will find that 15 people who were present there at the scene did not experience, process, or even see the same things. Okay, that's just a known fact. When I do my trauma informed ethics class and I teach people to understand that their way is not the only way in life, like their way of processing pain is not the only way to process pain, that you are not some deeply rooted box of like, I am the way. God is the way, not you. And God is a creative God. Okay. He uses many different people, many different situations, circumstances, environments to do his bidding, to do his will. He does not need you to be the thing. Like, "Ugh, if they don't do it my way, they'll never get healing." No, that's not true. That's just not true. So it is a part of the process is step 4, the collaboration. You have to work together. They have to be able to tell you, this is where I'm at. This is the part that I'm willing to address, that I'm willing to start to manage. Um, this is where I'm willing to start to surrender. This is something that I've been struggling with, but this other thing over here I've actually been doing good with, because the thing that you might think is the worst actually might be have been the easiest thing for them to process, and the thing that you think like, oh, that wasn't that bad, may have been the worst. And I can tell you that from personal experience. The things that people thought, oh, that must have been horrific for you to experience, I'm like, no, that was nothing in comparison to what happened next. And they're like, "Oh, that really did you in?" I'm like, "Yes, that did me in. That did me in, because this person was a predator and I didn't even truly honestly even know this person, but these people I knew and I loved and I cared about, and they were family, and the way that they hurt me was significantly deeper. There's surface wounds and then there's deep-rooted wounds, and some need surgery and some need a Band-Aid. You won't know until you start to have those conversations, because just because you assume that that's the thing that sets it all in motion. I just learned, I had to be humbled by this even in the last month. I was talking to someone that I was looking at their situation, their trajectory of decision making over the last 20 years, and I really genuinely thought that I was like, this critical crisis that happened, this trauma that they were an eyewitness to at a young age, had to have been the thing that set them in motion for their decision making. And I was so wrong. I was so wrong. And I didn't know I was wrong until I sat down and just had a conversation with them. And I was like, tell me where the chicken came from. Like, where did it all begin? And when she told me, I was like, it wasn't even on my horizon. It wasn't even on my timeline. And I thought I genuinely knew this person. And I thought I, had been present for a great deal of their life. So I really thought that I knew, oh, yeah, like, this happened, which caused them to do this, which caused them to, no. But I didn't really honestly get to know that till I shut up and I listened. And I wasn't trying to process as a professional. I wasn't trying to give them my knowledge. I really just I wanted to learn. And I think that's what I love about what I do is that sometimes I listen to people who have experienced things and I learn something new because I think that I know. And God's like, you don't know everything. You know, you can always learn more by listening. So the fifth part of this process of the mission is empowerment. We focus on strengths and resilience, not deficits. That's really important because when we see wounded people, what we tend to focus on is the thing that is like staring at us, right? It's like something that needs a suture, that needs cleansing, that needs stitching up, that needs healing. And so that's all we're staring at. It's all we're looking at. We're looking at the limb that's hanging off their body. We're looking at their heart that's on the outside of their, chest. And we're sitting there and we're going, oh my gosh, like, how are we going to get this under control? And we forget to talk to the person, to like speak to the person because we're sitting there going, okay, here's how we're going to handle this. And here's how we're going to handle this. And here's how we're going to handle this. And so all they see themselves as a problem you're trying to fix. And when we can see them as like, oh, no, like, tell me your hopes and your dreams. And they're like, wait, what? No, I want to, like, this thing happened to me. I'm like, yeah, we're totally going to deal with that 100%. But I also want to know where we're going. Like, tell me about your hopes and your dreams. Like, where did you see yourself before that happened? What were some ambitions that you had before all of this? Where are some places you'd like to see yourself 10 years from now? And it really changes their perspective about themselves because now they're not thinking about the limb that's hanging off their body, right? They're thinking about a hopeful future. And maybe it becomes a little bit daunting at the idea of like, I'm never going to get there. But I'm like, when you're hope, when you're encouragement, when you're that empowerment, you're like, no, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. And it's going to take time and it's going to be a process, but I'm committed to the process. And I know that I know that I know that sanctification exists and that he is constantly cleansing us and renewing us and, leading us towards perfection, and that we can only achieve one day when we're in heaven. But the journey is a beautiful process. And so we have to look at the journey as not this daunting, horrible thing of like, oh yeah, it's going to be really hard. But you look at it and you give them a sense of joy and hope. And like, yeah, it's going to be messy and it's going to be scary, but it's going to be cool. Like, I'm so excited for you. Like, I can't even begin to imagine what he's going to do with this. And I'm here for it. All the chaos in between and then seeing you victorious on the other side. And it really throws people when you don't just see them as like your pet project or um, like a charity case. And some people actually, they don't even know what to do with that. They can even remove themselves from that situation because they've become so accustomed to that victimization and being a victim that they actually want to move towards people who go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that's happening to you. Like, let me tell you. And then so they actually stay in that addiction to empathy, which I talk about in other trainings. And it becomes really difficult for them to process how to move forward because they can't see themselves outside of just where they are. And again, if they can't label it, if they can't surrender, then there's no point to you trying to push them down that path of like, no, 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 let's do this. Like, you need to get healing. If they're not there, they're not there. Let it go. There's people who will come alongside and unfortunately they will feed that enabling behavior. But when they get sick of that, because eventually, I mean, some people like they really do have to come to the end of themselves and realize like, oh, I'm sick of hearing my own self cry about stuff. Then they'll grow. They'll want to grow. And that's what you pray for and that's what you hope for, because you really don't give up on the person. You give up on the process of saying, I'm not going to push them into this process, but I'm going to pray for you that you get to a place where this becomes something that doesn't look daunting, but in inviting, that it looks inviting for you and that is something that you want to be successful at. In Isaiah 61:1, the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound. So I just wanted to be able to share this here at the end because I think that we emphasize too much on healing, that we have to get a person from a place of hurt to healing. And that's not necessarily what he calls us to. There are seasons of healing, instantaneous healing, and instantaneous freedom and instantaneous things, but it's not always. It's not always. Sometimes it's just sitting with the brokenhearted, and making them come to a place where they can acknowledge that there's an idea that they can no longer have to be tied to this bondage of pain. But it takes intentionality and to know that God will send you to people. Because another thing that you can kind of feel overwhelmed with is like, how do I help everyone, with this and like still have time? Focus on who God brings to you, because that means they're ready, they're prime. Or he sends you to, he's like, that one, go talk to that one. My husband can't stand it. And I have a reputation for this, of walking into a room and I will sense when someone is alone and carrying something very heavy or processing something. And I don't make assumptions, but I do put myself in situations where I just will walk up to people and ask questions. And usually I'll get one of two responses. They're looking for friendship and they're just looking for community, which I'm always happy to present. Like I'm always, willing to have people at my table. Or like it's like they see me approach and they just instantaneously cry. And it's because just the idea that they've been seen. I'm not anyone special. I don't have any special abilities. I don't have any special qualifications. But people can tell when you carry intentionality, when you're like, I don't have a motive. I just know I'm supposed to come and talk to you and listen. And I care about whatever it is that you want someone to see and want and need to say. And that really makes the world of difference when you are dealing with people who have gone through trauma. So I hope that when you are making your game plan, like you're like, okay, how do I help people in this situation? That the first thing that you learn to pray and to release and to surrender of yourself is yourself. That there can't be any part of you in being with the brokenhearted. He says, the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me. So it's the Spirit. It's not even me. It's not even me caring about people. It's not even me being like, oh, yeah, I'm such a good person. I go over there and I talk to people. No, it's God's presence in me. I can't even take credit for that. I mean, I really wish I could. I really wish I could tell you that I'm such a good person. But it's not, because he doesn't always send me to everyone either. I don't always see everybody else's pain. But when he wants me to see it, it's like I can't. It's like a magnet. It's like I literally can't not do it. And my husband will kind of know, like, oh, okay, we're going to be here for a minute, because I try to be really intentional about it. But it's such an intentionality on God's part of knowing, like, okay, this person is ready, and also an intentionality to know your heart. Are you ready to be that for other people? Are you ready to be that intentional for other people? Because the two things have to be right. And anything outside of that is a forced sense of false motives. And you can actually hurt people more than you can help them. So Thanks for walking through this topic with me, and I hope that you learn a thing or two. And I hope this breakdown and this process that I have here helps you to guide you in having these conversations with others and helping them.